In a small village in Ireland, there lived a man named Jack, known far and wide for his cunning ways and despicable nature. He was not just a simple miser, he was a trickster who would outsmart anyone just to save a few coins. Jack was a man of dubious morals, often scheming against his neighbors and enjoying the misfortune of others. One late evening, after a long day of drinking, Jack found himself wandering home. Along the way, he had encountered the devil. The devil had come to claim his soul. Being told of Jack's ways and being curious and a little bit envious, the devil couldn't wait to take Jack's soul. Jack, realizing the gravity of the situation, devised a plan to save himself. "Why not have a drink with me first?" Jack proposed. The devil, intrigued, agreed, and they headed to a local pub. As they drank, Jack continued to charm the devil, and after a while, the bar bill came. Jack, quick on his feet, suggested a clever ruse. "Why not turn yourself into a coin? That way, I can pay the bill, we can leave, you turn yourself back into yourself, and no one's the wiser." The devil, eager to indulge, transformed into a shiny coin. But Jack had no intentions of paying the bill. Instead, he pocketed the coin, next to a crucifix he kept for luck. The devil was trapped, unable to escape due to the power of the crucifix. Realizing he had outsmarted the devil, Jack struck a bargain. He would release the devil if he promised not to take Jack's soul for 10 years. The devil, though furious, agreed, and was freed from the coin's confinement. Years passed, and Jack continued his wicked ways. When the 10 years were up, the devil returned to claim his due. This time, Jack was not ready to go quietly. He said, "Before you take me, let me have one last meal." The devil, unable to refuse, allowed Jack for one last meal at a nearby apple tree. While up in the tree, Jack had another idea. He asked the devil to climb up and help him pick some apples. Once the devil climbed the tree, Jack quickly carved a cross into the trunk, trapping the devil up into the tree once again. Jack made another deal. He would let the devil go if he promised not to claim his soul for another decade. Once again, the devil relented, and Jack was freed. However, as the years passed, Jack grew older, and when he finally died, he approached the pearly gates of heaven. St. Peter looked at Jack and said, "Your deeds in life have not earned you a place here." Feeling desperate, Jack then turned to hell. But when he arrived, the devil stood at the gates, arm crossed, with a smirk on his face. "You really thought you could trick me forever, Jack?" The devil said. "You are not welcome here either. You wasted your life on tricks and deceit." With nowhere to go, Jack pleaded, "What will I do? It's dark. I cannot see." The devil, still amused by Jack's predicament, took pity on him, albeit begrudgingly. He tossed Jack a single glowing coal from the fires of hell. Jack took the coal and hollowed out a turnip he had found on the ground. He placed the glowing ember inside to light his way as he wandered the earth, forever lost. To remember Jack's fate, the villagers began to carve faces into turnips and place candles inside them, creating jack-o'-lanterns to ward off evil spirits. As the stories spread, Jack became known as Stingy Jack, a cautionary figure reminding people to live with kindness and integrity. And so, every autumn, when the night grows longer and the air turns crisp, People light their jack-o'-lanterns, remembering the clever but selfish man who tricked the devil and was doomed to wander the earth for all eternity. Welcome to Scary Stories with Sai. And that was the story of Stingy Jack and ultimately the creation of the Jack-o'-lantern legends as we know about them today. Now, when it turned from turnip to pumpkin, I'm not too sure, and the legends don't exactly say, but at some point in time, things went from turnips to pumpkins. And then we have the jack-o'-lanterns that are found pretty much everywhere this time of year. And as you guys could probably guess, this week we're actually going to be talking about the origins of Halloween. Now, this episode, because there's just so much that goes into it, from the pagan and Celtic roots of Samhain to the eventual Roman involvement, the Christian colonization of it, like, there's a lot that goes into the history of Halloween. So this episode is actually going to be taking place over both this week and next week, just to try to cover everything. But with this much to get into, let's just go ahead and dive on in. So, believe it or not, despite the commercialism and everything that we know of modern day Halloween, in order to actually understand the roots of Halloween, we need to travel back about 2,000 years, back to the ancient Celtic times for a festival called Samhain. Now, if you're familiar with the television series Supernatural, they did an entire episode about Samhain, but they pronounce it Samhain. This is the Latin pronunciation of a non-Latin word. A lot of the words, which I'm going to go over a couple of them throughout these two episodes, they're not Latin, so they're not pronounced the same ways that we're used to. So phonetically, it may be spelled Samhain, but it's actually pronounced Samhain. But Samhain was celebrated around October 31st to November 1st. It marked the end of the harvest season and the beginning of winter. This was a time of celebration where the work was finally over, everybody was done with all of the hard work, the harvesting, and it was time for family to be home with plenty of food, time to tell each other stories. And for the Celts, this was a time of transition, where the boundary between the living and the dead became blurred. This part is commonly used in modern media. The veil is thinnest on All Hallows Eve. You would find that story in like Hocus Pocus, Halloween Town, but the Celts believed that on this night, the veil between the worlds was just that, the thinnest. It was a time when spirits of the deceased could return to Earth, and it was believed that, well, this was a good way for people to talk to their ancestors, but was also kind of scary. So people would offer sacrifices and setting places at tables for loved ones who had passed, hoping that maybe they would come back. This connection to the dead was an integral part of their culture and belief system. And truth be told, while I'm going to be talking about it in more detail next week, seems to have a lot of connections to the Mexican Day of the Dead. But let's talk about one of the most significant elements of Samhain, bonfires. Bonfires are actually a Celtic thing. They played a very important role in the celebration, symbolizing purification and protection. Large fires were lit on hilltops, and the flames were thought to ward off evil spirits and provide light and warmth during the darkened nights of winter. Families would also carry torches lit from their bonfires back to their houses to ensure protection throughout the year, kind of taking a little bit home for themselves. But these flames were a source of comfort, a way of bringing community together, and a reminder of the light amidst darkness. In fact, these bonfires were often used in rituals where animals would be sacrificed to appease the gods, ensuring a fruitful harvest for the next year. Now, this part also kind of reminded me a lot of the Olympics and how, like, the person has a train of people running over to with the flame that they use to start off the whole thing. Kind of reminded me a lot about that. But the word Samhain itself comes from the old Irish for summer's end. It signified not just the end of harvest, but also the transition to a much more difficult season. It wasn't like it is nowadays. Back then, winter was much more dangerous. The Celts, who were mostly an agrarian society, understood the importance of these cycles. They celebrated the bounty of summer while preparing for the hardships of winter. They would stock up and prepare to make sure that whenever time finally came around, they were ready, because around winter time, they weren't really able to leave all that often. There wasn't really a going to work that was already done. If you didn't have it taken care of, well, that's unfortunate. In Celtic mythology, though, many deities were actually used and associated for this time of year. For example, even the goddess of fertility and death, the Morrigan, was often invoked during Samhain. She represented the duality of life and death, embodying the cycle of nature, the whole kind of concept of what the entire Samhain festival is. The connection to divine further deepened the significance of the festival, though, where they would basically start off with people would start off their life, they would die. It's the same kind of concept with the seasons changing, the transition from summer to fall, or from fall to winter. Yeah. But as we explore the Celtic influence on Halloween, it is important to note that the festival was not about fear or darkness. It was a celebration of life, community, and the cynical nature of existence. They didn't really, while I mentioned earlier about the whole being afraid of the spirits, it wasn't the same kind of fear that we talk about in, the Poltergeist. I mean, there were some aspects with it, but it was nowhere near as prevalent as it is nowadays. The Celts more of honored their ancestors and sought to maintain a connection with the spiritual world, which remained an echo in many traditions that we celebrate today. We still have a lot of that kind of stuff that we talked about, but obviously this isn't the same kind of Halloween that we have today. The story transitions when the Roman Empire gets involved. When the Roman Empire expanded its influence into Celtic territories and took over those areas, it kind of incorporated what they had into the Roman side of everything. Because, the Romans celebrated a festival called Feralia. It was also held in late October and was also used to honor the deceased. They also had Pomona, which was dedicated to the goddess of fruit and trees. So the two kind of went hand in hand. With Roman conquest, many of their customs began to intertwine with those of the Celts. The merging of these traditions kind of created a rich tapestry of cultural practices surrounding death and the harvest season. This blend of Roman and Celtic customs would eventually pave the way for future celebrations and ultimately what we have nowadays, with a lot more involvement in the future. But just to kind of go over what we've talked about, we've explored the Festival of Samhain, its significance to Celtic culture, and how the bonfires that we do at small town festivals, homecoming events for high school, all of those are actually rooted in Celtic. Really quickly going back a little bit, I wanted to talk about the creatures that were directly connected to Samhain and the Celtic legends all the way around. There's a few different mythological creatures or beings that were very big back then. Like, for example, there was the Puka. The Puka is a shape-shifting spirit that it appears as a horse, goat, it could look as a person, and they're commonly known for, like, leading people astray, but, like, the Puka was said to roam freely, and being an embodiment of the whole kind of shifting, changing kind of personality held a lot of significance and connection to Samhain and was commonly depicted through a lot of stories and different kinds of art that they would have throughout the areas. And then there was... Now, hold on one quick second. This is another one of those words that was a little bit difficult. It was she. It's Sidhe. And for lack of better terms, they're fairies. But they're spirits of ancient Irish and are often associated in like the whole fairy concept. They're seen as protectors of the land. But with Samhain being a time when the she could cross into the human world, offerings were commonly made to appease these spirits, ensuring a harmonious relationship. If you've looked into fairies at all, they're cute and fluffy, but not exactly the nicest of things. And then another one that is probably one of the most popular, even though it's known by a different name nowadays, the Dullahan. The Dullahan is a headless horseman, often depicted carrying his own head under one arm. Very significant, or very similar to the whole storyline of Sleepy Hollow. He's commonly considered a harbinger of death, but with the whole death thing and being like the headless horseman and like all of that in Samhain, he symbolizes the impending winter and the finality of death, reinforcing the whole morality and supernatural behind everything. With Samhain being a family festival, the Banshee though is a spirit who they're commonly known for their scream. It's more called a wail. The wailing woman is what they're sometimes called, and it's a belief behind sadness and sorrow. But her presence during the time and situations of Samhain emphasizes the thin boundary between life and death, the importance of family ties, and just a whole familial concept. And then these last two that I wanted to talk about that are directly connected to the Celtic Samhain, these are both a god and a goddess, and the phonetic pronunciation of it was a little bit harder to find, so I'm going to try my best. The first one, I believe, is pronounced Kalik, and Kalik is a goddess associated with winter. She's often depicted as an old woman, and she's dressed very appropriately. Like, it's a very representation of the cold months. She is obviously there as a connection to the winter. She is said to gather wood from the forest for fires to keep everybody warm and protected during the harsh winter times. It's believed that the winters were much colder than they actually felt, but because of the goddess watching over them is why a lot of them were able to survive. And then another one was Cernunnos. He was a horned god associated with fertility, animals, and the underworld, and overall just life itself. Kind of like Anubis in this area. But he's not specifically connected to Samhain, but his whole concept of the underworld and death, life, fertility, it all connects to Samhain, but he was not one that was commonly represented back then, just one that I kind of wanted to throw out there with a lot of connections to it nowadays. well, not really nowadays, but connections to Samhain. But with that being said, that's actually where we're going to end this week's episode. Next week, we're going to be going over the eventual Christian colonization of Halloween and then the commercialized colonization of Halloween to where we eventually get to where we have Halloween proven to us nowadays. I hope you guys have enjoyed talking about this for a little while, and can't wait to see you guys next week.